you haven't bought any tickets for our raffle, by all means do so now. Before we begin, I just want to, there's two announcements, one for myself and another for Paul, who's the chair of the Australian branch of the Western Front Association. We've got an excursion coming up on Sunday, the 26th of May, to the Lancers Barracks at Parramatta. If you're keen to come along, if you could send me an email to our President's email just down there, president@military Society. You don't have to pay, you do need $15 cash on the day. Okay, so when we get there at 10 o'clock, the curator of the museum at the barracks will meet us at the front gate. We've got about 15 people already signed up. We can take up to 20. So if you're keen to come along, just meet us outside the barracks. It's here at Parramatta, it's not very far away from the train station. And just have $15 in your hot hands. And it's just a matter of paying as we go through. Every month, every end of the month, they bring the armour out of the sheds to give them a nice clean, so we'll have access to all of their, I believe there'll be some APCs there and a number of different other vehicles. And then we'll also have access to the barracks museum. So we're looking forward to that. Again, if you're interested, just send me an email with your name, and then we can at least have a list and know who's coming. But don't pay, just have $15 cash in your hands. So Paul, I might just ask you to come forward. Another announcement from Paul.
Thank you, Mr. President.
My pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
Hi everyone, I'm Paul Semidas. As part of the 90th anniversary of the Anzac Memorial, I'm organising another lecture event here on the afternoon of Saturday, the 18th of May, at which there will be two talks delivered on two fighter pilots of the Great War, both Australians, one of which served in the Australian Flying Corps and the other was the British in the Royal Naval Air Service. The lectures begin at 1:30 p.m. and they conclude about 3:30 with an afternoon tea. There's no charge, but this is an important event and I would encourage you to take a flyer and perhaps attend on the day. One of the men is Francis Ryan Smith of No. 2 Squadron Australian Flying Corps. His grandson is going to speak about that man and show memorabilia, models and ephemera related to that combat aces experience with the Australians. The second talk is on Squadron Commander Jim Goebel, an Australian, one of nearly 2,000 that served with the British Air Forces, and he rose to high rank in the Royal Australian Air Force after the war. It's well worth attending. It's as easy to get here as you did today, and I encourage you to attend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. So I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker this morning, Professor Mesut. Professor Mesut received his MA in Politics and PhD in International Relations at Istanbul University. During his military career, he served as a platoon leader and company battalion commander in various infantry units, completing several tours as a UN military observer in Georgia and as a staff officer in Afghanistan and Bosnia. He served as an associate professor at the Turkish Military Academy for 10 years and the University of New South Wales for 5 years. He is currently Professor of International Relations at Ankara Bilim University in Turkey. He is the co-author of the Ottoman Army and the First World War, the Phase Line flotilla, amphibious campaigns for Cyprus, the Ottoman defence against the Anzac Landing, which was published by the Australian Army History Unit, a military history of the Ottomans from Osman to Ataturk, and numerous articles and book chapters. I believe his latest book, soon to be published, is about the Gaza battles, and again it will be published by the Australian Army History Unit. We put our hands together to welcome Professor Mesut.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. And thank you to the audience coming here in a wet Sydney day, sacrificing your Saturday to listen to me. I really appreciate that. So, today I will deliver a talk about the famous Battle of Beersheba. I hope you will get different perspectives because I'll try to cover the other side of the hill. So if any of you come here to listen about the achievements of the Australian light horse, sorry, you come to a wrong presentation. Okay, so we are talking about the legends. It is always difficult to talk about legends. Last week on 25th April, I participated down ceremony in Gallipoli. I did this for many years starting in 1995, and in each year I am coming to the conclusion that it is becoming a secular religion, especially affecting the young generations of Australia. So, talking about legends, talking about a religious subject is difficult. And you know that every year we are witnessing new publication of books about Beersheba. Actually, the library shelves are moaning under the weight of them, and most of them repeating the well-known text. And interestingly, we are witnessing newcomers in 2017 during the centenary of the Beersheba battle. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the state of Israel won out of this battle. So this is a legend that is growing and growing. Okay, Beersheba was not a battle between two nation states, Turkey fighting against Australia. Beersheba was part of a larger war, First World War, fought between two empires, British Empire and the Ottoman Empire. So in addition to the Australians, there were other subject nations of the British Empire fighting against the Ottomans, and in addition to the Turks, there were Arabs, Kurds, Albanians, Circassians, and all sorts of the other ethnic groups fighting against the Australians. And in fact, there were Jews fighting against the British exactly in Beersheba, wearing Ottoman uniforms. And to make the things more complex, it was a global war between two major alliances. So Beersheba was just a small story of a global war between two major alliances. To understand Beersheba, you need to be aware that this is a global war between two major alliances, and this was a war between two major empires. Okay, Palestine front was just one of the 8 fronts of the Ottoman Empire. And up until 1917, it was not a major one. During 1915 period, Gallipoli was the major one. In 1914, 1916, and to a certain extent 1917, Caucasus Front was the major one. So an empire fighting against enemies of an alliance in different fronts, and Palestine front was just one of them. Okay, Enver Pasha was the commander-in-chief of the Ottoman armed forces, and he was a real believer that the victory would be won or lost at the Western Front. Although he was in charge of the Ottoman army, he believed that the Ottoman fronts were Oriental sideshows. So he tried to divert as many Entente troops, the British, French, Russians, away from European fronts as he could. He saw this as the major duty of the Ottoman army. He thought that even if the Ottomans lost provinces, if the Germans were able to win the war in Western Front, then the Ottomans could able to recover the lost provinces and may able to earn more places. He had a German general, Bronsart von Schellendorf. You are seeing his photo here. And Bronsart von Schellendorf was in charge of the Ottoman general staff, and he was the guy who prepared the battle plans, the operational plans. At the beginning, in 1914, the Ottomans had no intention to attack Egypt. The Ottomans had no intention to open a front in Palestine, Sinai region. But because the Germans got stuck at Western Front, needed help from the Ottomans as soon as possible, the Ottomans decided to launch a campaign against the Suez Canal. Against the commonly established understanding, the Ottomans had no intention to capture Egypt because they had only 3 divisions attacking the Suez. Their intention was to divert as many British troops as they could, and if possible, to inflict a defeat. Although the Ottoman Suez Canal campaign failed tactically, it was an Ottoman defeat, but operationally they did succeed because throughout the war the British kept many soldiers, many divisions in Egypt. So that was the main aim, to divert British troops away from Western Front and to fix them, and the Ottomans succeeded that. As you know, the Australians and the Ottomans faced each other first in Gallipoli, but that doesn't mean that all the Australian soldiers in Egypt in 1917 did serve in Gallipoli. Few of them actually did that. And the Australian understanding of the Ottoman soldiers changed drastically. In Gallipoli, they saw brave, capable enemy soldiers. In Egypt, they saw less brave, less successful soldiers due to the circumstances. But it is important that there was a connection between Gallipoli and Palestine campaign, at least in the minds of the soldiers. And even if the Australian soldier, an individual, did not serve in Gallipoli, he thought he still carried that connection. Okay, to understand what went right or wrong in Beersheba, you need to pay attention to the raids and small battles took place in Sinai Peninsula in 1916. The Australian Light Horse and the New Zealand Mounted Infantry launched several raids, capturing Ottoman units and circling the Ottoman positions, attacking and capturing the Ottoman units most often intact. This successful plan tried to be carried out by the British general Murray in charge, the commander of the Egyptian Expeditionary Force. He attacked Gaza twice, and he tried to follow the same successful formula that achieved result in Sinai. He failed. He even tried to make use of tanks and chemical weapons for the first time. During the second Gaza battle, the British made use of 8 tanks, 2 small, and around 10,000 chemical shells. They found out that hot weather, desert sand, not proper for the use of the chemical weapons. But it was the British that first used chemical weapons in the Middle East nearly 100 years before Saddam Hussein of Iraq. So after the second Battle of Gaza, there was a change of command. Archibald Murray Podge and Edmund Allenby arrived from Western Front, the famous Bull. Allenby was lucky because when he arrived, General Chetwood, a corps commander, already made a plan targeting instead of Gaza to Beersheba. So according to his plan, the mounted troops and some infantry divisions would attack Beersheba, capture the Beersheba, and turn to the northwest and capture Gaza. That was basically the plan. And Allenby immediately approved the plan because he could not attack Gaza first, politically, militarily, from the moral perspective. His political masters in London did not want to hear the name Gaza again. His soldiers accusing their commanders of attacking Gaza again and again. So everybody looking an alternative. So Allenby came with enormous power, but he had to attack Beersheba instead of Gaza. That caused trouble with his staff officers and some of his subordinates. They said that the Ottomans were very weak, so instead of attacking Beersheba, we need to attack Gaza once again. Because the problem was, you cannot go to north from Gaza in large units. The road capacity, availability of the water and other stuff not available. So no larger units can advance from Beersheba towards Jerusalem. So after capturing Beersheba, you need to turn left and attack all the Ottoman positions on the way, with an attack directly to the Gaza, capture Gaza, and then you may be able to go to the north. So some of his subordinates, especially Captain Garcia, he later on published a book about his points, and some of his generals said that we will waste time and effort and we will not be able to destroy the Ottoman army if we attack Beersheba. We need to attack Gaza again because they said that we had the manpower, but most importantly, we had the firepower to destroy whole Gaza and capture it once and for all, and at the same time to destroy all the Ottoman armies located there. Okay, what was the thinking at the Ottoman side? So this gentleman, the German general Kress von Kressenstein, was in charge of the Ottoman army, defending Palestine from the very beginning, from 1914 until 1917. He was well aware about the weakness of Gaza, and he thought that the British also knew about it. And as far as he was concerned, Beersheba was useless without water. The name Beersheba in Arabic means Beersheba, that means 7 water wells. Beersheba was famous of its waters in a desert, and you can even find Beersheba wells in Bible, the Abraham's wells. So the importance of Beersheba was water. Without water, Beersheba was nothing. So Kress von Kressenstein was thinking that if we're able to destroy the water sources before the British capture it, it would be a disaster for the British. Too many horses, no water, the end result would be a disaster. So he said that if I was British, I would attack Gaza. If they were silly enough to attack Beersheba, my soldiers in Beersheba would destroy all the water sources and they will be completely destroyed by their self-inflicted decision. Okay, exactly at this point in time, the Germans unleashed a new project, creation of a new army group under the command of a general, a German general and a German general staff. They sent the former Chief of General Staff Falkenhayn to the Ottoman Empire. They created new army, the 7th Army, and the thinking was the German commanders with German staff able to defeat the Serbs and the Romanians, so they already had a successful recipe, and they thought that the Ottoman soldiers were good but not the Ottoman officers. So if we put German officers in decision-making positions, they were able to achieve a victory. But what they forget about, both in Serbia and Romania, in addition to the German officers, the Germans also provided some divisions and firepower. But here in Palestine, because of distance, because of limited transportation means, they only managed to send a brigade, not several divisions, but just one brigade. So, with a flick of pen, they created an army group consist of 8 army. It was the previous 8 army corps defending the Palestine front starting from 1940, and they created a new army, 7th Army. If you take a look at this or what the order of battle, you got into a thinking that there should be a serious defense force there. But the problem was, in terms of manpower and firepower, we are not talking about an army group. We are actually talking about an army corps, because all these divisions have the fighting power around 3,000 soldiers. They're supposed to have 10,000, but at this time the Ottomans did not have that manpower. The Germans provided some artillery, some machine guns, etc., but still well below the level of the British. So on paper, an army group was defending Palestine. In reality, it was an army corps. So the British should know about this, and they had the necessary information thanks to their signal intelligence, human intelligence, and lots of other information pouring into the British decision makers. So this was the situation at Beersheba. So infantry, the Ottomans around 4,000, the British 27,000, and only 17,000 of them joined the battle. Cavalry, light horse, I think there's no need to describe the difference between light horse and cavalry. So the Ottomans had 800 cavalry and the British had 12,000 mounted infantry, machine guns, artillery. So when you take a look at these numbers, you get into difficulty to understand why Allenby decided to attack Beersheba. Because he could easily overcome the Gaza without any big problem. And if you pay attention, he sent 12,000 light horse to Beersheba and only 8,000 of them really joined the battle. And during his attacks to Gaza, he suffered to make use of the successes because lack of mounted infantry. All of them down under in Beersheba. Okay, when you are examining a battle, you need to examine all the levels. But in Australia, thanks to the legacy of Charles Bean, people would like to look at the battles from the perspective of individual soldiers or officers at the lowest level, from the narrow window that this officer or individual able to witness. But if you are examining a battle, you need to see the individual level, technical level, small units level, the tactical level, the operational level, and the strategic level. So at the strategic level, the Ottomans wanted to divert and fix the British. They didn't care about the loss of provinces, they didn't care about loss of Jerusalem. All they did care was to divert as many British troops away from Western Front. For the British, they needed to capture Jerusalem because there's a new government in power, Lloyd George, and he needed a victory desperately, especially after the setbacks the British army suffered at the Western Front. Too many casualties, people losing their faith in victory. So delivering Jerusalem before Christmas would increase the morale in Britain, but capturing Jerusalem would serve to no military purposes. Because by capturing Jerusalem, the Ottoman Empire would not surrender. And after capturing Jerusalem, you need to advance further north to kick the Ottomans out of the war. That was the situation at the strategic level. At the operational level, we have Allenby unable to attack Gaza first because of the political, moral problems. He had to attack Beersheba. That means after Beersheba, he had to turn to the Gaza to capture Gaza, and in the meantime, the Ottoman army would have the chances to escape. Okay, this is the guy, İsmet Bey, in charge of defending Beersheba. He was the commander of the 3rd Ottoman Army Corps. But in reality, he was commanding in fighting power a division, less than 10,000 fighting soldiers. He had little faith in defending the Beersheba. He thought that if the British attacked in power, he would be defeated. And he had also problems with some of his subordinates, especially this gentleman, Esad Bey, commander of the 3rd Cavalry Division. So Esad Bey was more senior to İsmet. He was more experienced with Palestine. İsmet was coming from the Caucasus. And until this point, İsmet did not command any combat unit. He was a wonderful staff officer without any command experience. So Esad had limited faith in İsmet and always voicing his concern during the decision-making processes. So we already have a problematic command relation in Beersheba. So when the attack materialized, the Australians attacking from the south and from a flanking attack from the east, and the British territorial infantry attacking from the west, there was an Ottoman army corps, a very big one, in a hopeless situation, and the number one duty of İsmet and the Ottoman soldiers was to destroy the water sources before too late. So their orders coming from the German General von Kress was, in case of difficulty, destroy the water sources and escape. That was a very simple order. Okay. Early in the morning, 5:50, the British territorial infantry initiated the frontal assault to the western defenses of Beersheba after a very powerful fire preparation, 100 guns firing to the Ottoman positions, and there were around 2,500 Ottoman soldiers defending this place. And in the mid of the day, they captured most of the places, except some positions here. And the British general in charge of the offensive, General Chatwood, the one who prepared the plan, stopped. He had every means to capture whole Beersheba before the evening. By infantry alone, he could able to capture it. But he was the guy who prepared the plan. So he said, my role finished. So the British infantry, after capturing the Ottoman position, stopped advancing, giving the chances to the Australian light horse and the New Zealand mounted infantry to do their part. And pay attention, it was the British territorials doing most of the killing and dying. But in regular stories, forget about Australia, even in Britain, they don't talk about the role of the British territorials. And if you read any of the popular works, you get an understanding that British territorials were terrible soldiers, always complaining, achieving nothing, a burden on the shoulders of the Australians, and they were there because of the imperial policy. Okay, when the Australian light horse and New Zealanders mounted infantry launched their attacks after the British infantry, they suffered a major problem this year, Hel Sabah. Initially, the Ottoman commander İsmet did not send any troops there, but when he realized that there was a flanking attack happening, he hurriedly sent some infantry and cavalry there to defend this place. And this makeshift defense able to hold until the evening. And the famous last charge being done, the Australian light horse overcome the Ottoman defenses and enter into the city. İsmet and the 3rd Cavalry grabbed whatever they could and they escaped. And unfortunately, they couldn't manage to destroy the water sources. There were 17 wells the Ottomans able to destroy, only 2 of them. And all the other water sources, there were some huge pools, motors, pipes, all of them left intact. So the İsmet failed to do his simple job because during the rush of the event, some staff officer ordered the engineers company in charge of destroying all these water sources to fight as infantry. So engineers fighting as infantry, nobody destroying the water sources. When they realized the hopelessness of the situation, it was too late to destroy the water sources. And like I said, most of them captured intact without damage. Later on, İsmet tried to defend himself, writing down 38 pages long report accusing the German general von Kress. He managed to save his skin. The German general purged out of the Ottoman army. Von Kress was sent because Falkenhayn from the very beginning hated him. And İsmet later became the president of Turkish Republic. But the trail of the Beersheba, the shame of Beersheba continued behind him. When his enemies would like to accuse him for anything, they would immediately say, Beersheba. And interestingly, İsmet wrote down a detailed memoir. He didn't mention anything about Beersheba for understandable reason. I mean, he had only one duty, to destroy the water sources, and he failed. End of the story. Okay, we need to do lots of research. For example, what about the locals, the Arabs? Most of the soldiers defending Beersheba were Arabs. The local Arabs were also supporting the defense because Beersheba was created as a town very recently in order to settle down the Arab nomads, the Bedouins. It was an artificial town. The Ottoman government invested a lot of money, and the locals also wanted to keep and develop Beersheba. Unlike the story Benjamin Netanyahu provided in front of the audience in 2017, there was no Jewish locals there. There were some Jewish soldiers wearing Ottoman uniforms, but they were fighting against the British. So the Australians did not liberate the Jewish people in Beersheba. There were none. And if you go to Beersheba today, you will have difficult to find any Arabs there. So all the Arabs in Beersheba, most of them gone. And this is the position of the famous old mosque in Gaza. If you Google it on the internet, you will find out that because of the current war, the mosque is just like this. It is again destroyed. So this is another touchy point of Palestine. We are talking about a battle took place more than 100 years ago, but there's still a war going on right now. And while trying to explain this battle, you somehow touching to the current events. It is like an elephant in the room. As a military historian, you are trying to circle around the elephant, trying to tell the old story without creating any kind of current problems. Because when you try to explain the things as it was, automatically it had some reversions, some effects to the current issues. So what happened to the locals during these battles, during this Palestine campaign, still missing in the literature. Prisoner of wars. Not many Australians were captured by the Ottomans, but there were some. 2 books already published about the Australian prisoners, Australian soldiers captured by the Ottomans, but they are not telling the whole story. There are still things that we need to cover, and this is a hot spot. I mean, most people would like to hear individual stories. They don't want to hear the operational, tactical details of the battles. They want to hear the sufferings of the individual soldiers, what happened to them. Okay, this is the end of my lecture. I barely cover some spots. I stay away from getting into details. If you want to get more information of the details, my book about the Gaza battles and Palestine campaign will be published by the Australian Army History Unit soon. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I deliver them the text. It passed through the editing, and we are just waiting to see the final result. And you will get more information about them. If you have questions, I think we have time. And if you are not happy with my lecture, you can throw your rotten tomatoes.
Professor, what a new view.
A new view? No, that's not new.
Nothing.
Nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, the territorials did do good work there. But I would like to ask, you have just returned from Turkey.
That's
So
right.
you have been at the dawn service and you've been to the conference. Can you just tell us a bit about what the Turkish perspective is in 2024 with the war in Gaza now?
There's a huge interest about what had happened 100 years, more than 100 years ago. Up to now, several books published, including the official military history of the campaign, but these books not user-friendly, difficult to understand. You need to open several military maps in order to decipher what is going on the ground. I have published a book about the Gaza battles in Turkish. It is selling well, so money coming from the sources. But still, like the Australians, the Turkish people would like to connect to the battle by way of their ancestors, their grandfathers that fought there. And it is always difficult to explain an imperial battle to a national audience. Because in the end, people will rise, okay, what the hell, the Turkish soldiers were dying in the Arab desert, Arab sands, for what? And they might even use some nasty words saying that F the Palestine, F the Gaza, F the Beersheba. Why the Turkish soldiers and officers died there? They should have defended Anatolia, unable to understand the logic of the imperial army. And we have the same problem from the Arab audience also. They simply unable to understand why the Ottomans unable to defend the Gaza, Beersheba, unable to defend Palestine. Okay, at that time there was no Palestine as a geographic entity. It was a name frequently used but having no equivalence in administrative or geographical way. And the Ottomans never saying from a nationalistic perspective. They were fighting that because Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire, because they were part of a Grand Alliance, and there were also some German officers, some German ministers, they were also fighting that because of the Grand Alliance. I mean, it is difficult to explain these things to a very nationalistic audience. Currently, Turkey is passing through several political turmoils. Most of you are aware that there's a political Islamic party in power, which is making the Turkish nationalistic circles very angry. And our government putting Palestine and Gaza, saying that, you know, the Ottomans also fought that, and the current conflict has a connection to the battles of the First World War. That is not true. But and our nationalistic audience saying that, okay, you see, Our grandfathers died in Arabian sands, Arabian deserts for nothing. And the current conflict is also producing lots of casualties, but it will end in disaster like during the First World War. So in Turkey, it's a very political issue, unlike Gallipoli. Gallipoli warmed up the hearts of the Turks. They are now seeing Gallipoli as a wonderful experience, creating everlasting friendship with the Australians, New Zealanders. So having connection to Gallipoli is something that you need to be proud, but having connections to Gaza battles is not serving the same honorific position. Yes, please.
Firstly, thank you very much for the lecture. Excellent. And just one comment before I ask my question is, I have a friend visit Turkey just more than 12 months ago, and he was very, very well received all over Turkey, recognised being Australian because of the Gallipoli connection and so forth.
Yeah. It's a battle created everlasting friendship.
So,
it's a wonderful story.
yes, it's
Mosque Walton is called Gallipoli.
yeah. But my question relates to the strategy you mentioned. Lloyd George was what they called an Easterner, and believing that the Ottoman Empire should have been knocked out of the war early rather than fighting on the Western Front. What you said appears to contradict that view. Would that be correct, that Lloyd George had the wrong view of strategy?
Well, as far as I am concerned, Lloyd George and all the Easterners, so-called Easterners, because these guys change their ideas frequently, they were completely wrong. They had to invest to the Western Front. And the Ottomans were more than happy to divert as many troops to Palestine, Mesopotamia, etc. And in 1917, there were 1.5 million British soldiers and sporting elements in Palestine and Mesopotamia. 1.5 million. Okay, you might say, okay, not all of them might be used at the Western Front, that's right, because most of them Indians proved to be not very useful at the Western Front. But think about the food, think about the ammunition. Remember the famous ammunition crisis in 1916-17? Think about the weapons, think about lots of useful soldiers that could be achieve more meaningful results in Western Front. And don't forget also the Russians. The Russians had to allocate nearly 1 million soldiers with the sporting elements against the Ottomans. So the Ottoman fronts were really Oriental sideshows. They were bloody, but even if you gain victory, you would not achieve any strategic aim. I mean, capturing Jerusalem made the people very happy in London, in Paris, made the people angry in Berlin, Vienna, but that was turned out to be nothing. Of course, if you are from the Israel or Palestine, you might create your own stories out of the capture of Jerusalem in 1917. It might serve to your nationalistic purposes better, but for overall picture of the global war of First World War, fall of Jerusalem served to no particular military reason. The Ottomans continued to fight up until October 1918. And Allenby had the means to destroy the whole Ottoman army, and if he could able to destroy the Ottoman army, there might be some possibility of the possible fall of the Ottoman Empire. Because after the Ottomans losing their 2 armies in Palestine, which they couldn't replace, there will be nothing to stop the Allies advancing further north. But Allenby, because of political reasons, because of moral issues, because he was fearful of his reputation, he decided to attack Beersheba, wasting a golden opportunity to destroy the whole Ottoman army. And the funny thing is, he purge all the staff officers out of his staff, saying we need to attack Gaza first, including Garcia. So Garcia published his story in 1942 during the Second World War, saying that a general should not think politically, a general should think militarily.
Just one question, you keep referring to it, I haven't understood it. You talked about the attack on Beersheba because there was a moral opposition to attacking Gaza?
Yeah.
Could you, what's the moral opposition to attacking Gaza? Could you explain that?
Well, during the first and second Gaza battles, the soldiers created a legend saying that their generals unable to command them properly, the famous lions led by donkeys issue, and they started to see Gaza not as a military target but a kind of a bad omen. Lots of superstition saying that if we again attack Gaza, we will be defeated again, because during the first Gaza battle, most of the critical hills surrounding Gaza were captured. The Australian lighthouse, the New Zealand mounted infantry surrounded the Gaza, encircled the Gaza completely. So they were expecting the fall of the Gaza, but because of some poor tactical decisions, removing the infantry, ordering the lighthouse to return back, thinking that the horses need water, which they didn't. A series of miscalculations transformed into a defeat. And during the second Battle of Gaza, a kind of repetition of the same scenario happened. This created a huge moral issues. I mean, even if the London did not kick Murray out of power, the soldiers obviously very rebellious. Yeah, morale.
A morale. Not more.
Yeah, morale.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. I understood. Thank you.
John?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks very much for a wonderful lecture, Professor, and also for every time I read a book or see a documentary about the American campaign in the First World War, I get a different perspective and I change my mind and change my view. So thanks once again. But one thing that I think is just an observation is that operationally, it always seems to me that the side that did ultimately win was the one that made the fewest mistakes at the vital times. They both made horrendous errors going through, but it was ultimately, as you say, the fact that they didn't destroy the water supply in Beersheba that meant that they were able to prevail, that the British forces developed and prevailed. But I also thought it was an interesting point you made about the British territorials. I've always felt they get a pretty raw deal in a lot of the writings in Australia. They're dismissed as pretty ordinary, but they just sat on their duffs and had tea while horsemen were being slaughtered. That's not true.
Well, the problem is the current British audience, the British public, showing absolutely no interest to Palestine campaign, Gaza, and because the lack of interest and Australian over-interest created a misunderstanding that only the Australians fought that. Even the role of the New Zealanders, our poor cousins, also forgotten. Or sometimes remember they are with us but under our protection. I mean, remember the statue in Albany, two horsemen, Australian light horse soldier, helping the New Zealand mounted infantry who is horse being shot down. And I mean, this is showing the benevolent effort of the Australians to the New Zealanders, but that is because of the lack of British interest, the British public interest about Palestine front, and that is also correct for Gallipoli.
Yes.
I mean, I attended dawn ceremony at Anzac. The British also attended dawn ceremony at Anzac, not at Palace. I mean, that is because of the supply and demand. I mean, there's a huge demand coming from Australia, no demand from the British, and nowadays everybody is seeing the story from the Australian perspectives.
I was wondering if you've seen the Australian movie The White Horseman.
Sorry?
Have you seen the movie The White Horseman? It was some years ago, the Australian movie, popularising.
Yeah, I saw it.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, movies are not historical pieces. If you want to get a better understanding of the story, you need to watch documentaries, but even the documentaries serving to the purpose of the demand coming from the Australian audience of it. If you put the New Zealanders into the documentary, if you put the British territorials into the documentary, you will have no audience. I mean, I said at the beginning that this transformed into a kind of a secular religion. I mean, it is like reading Bible. Everybody knows the story, but everybody wants to listen it again and again, and praising the way the priest delivering the story, how poetic he is delivering the sermon, the emphasis on different words, and being in the same audience, sharing the same motion, provide a kind of a synergy, influencing everybody more. I mean, dance ceremony, it is surprising to see the reaction of the young Australians. They spend the whole night under cold, and in the morning, they warm up, listening the music, listening some of the speeches, but the sun is rising, emotions are rising up, everybody started to cry, and when somebody started to cry, the ones around us started to cry. I mean, I am participating in dance ceremonies starting from 1995. Initially, I was a junior lieutenant in charge of the ceremonial guard, wearing parade uniform, and every year this secular religious character is rising and rising. I mean, I am seeing a similar issue for Beersheba also. Reenactment of the lighthouse transformed into not like a kind of a movie reenactment, but performing a kind of a religious beauty. So when you are talking about a legend, you can only recite it, you cannot say anything against it, otherwise people will become very unhappy about it. But if you are really seriously interested in military history, you should put aside all these popular things behind and delve with the battle from the strategic level, operational level, tactical and technical level, and try to make use of it for the current conflicts. Because back then it was more simple, easy to understand. Right now, very complex, but we are still using the same essentials. So if we're able to understand the battles of the First World War, the current armed forces may be able to use it for the future wars, future battles.
Did I say that about the code?
Thank you. A revelation of the lecture, thank you. Every account I've read from the Australian side of Beersheba then goes on to say that the forward elements pushed ahead and entered Damascus, and that Damascus was the capital of the Ottoman Empire in that area, that the capture of Damascus was an overwhelming target, and that the forward elements entered Damascus, and Lawrence of Arabia had promised someone else, that they would be the first to enter Damascus. Now, in your lecture, you have repeatedly referred to Beersheba, northwest Gaza, then north. Could you give me your view on Damascus and the perception we have in the Australian accounts?
Okay, Damascus was the provincial center. Okay, Syria was a province of the Ottoman Empire. Damascus was the center of that province. Capturing Damascus ended up Ottoman presence in Arabian provinces, but not having big effect on Anatolia. The Ottomans surrendered in October 1918, not because of the defeat of their armies in Syria, but because of the Bulgarian surrender. Because when the Bulgarians surrendered, the Allied army in Salonika had nothing in front of them to advance to Istanbul. The Ottomans had a big division defending the borders. The Ottoman government decided to surrender immediately because the Allied army in Salonika could able to capture the capital city in a single week or maybe in 2 weeks. About who first entered Damascus, it was the Australians. It was the Australians first entered Damascus against the orders, because politically the British wanted the Arabs to enter Damascus in order to combat against the French political design to have Syria as their colonial dominion. So they sternly said to the Australians, okay, stop. It is the Arabs that captured the Damascus, say nothing about it, etc. But of course we are talking about Australians happy to brag about their achievements. So they continue saying, no, it was us, not the Arabs. But in the end, Syria became a French colonial possession, so no big changes. I appreciate the individual heroism. I appreciate the successes. In Beersheba, the Australian light horses did achieve a victory. They did act like a cavalry, but they were mounted infantry. So they should attack as on foot, but they did attack like cavalry without having the cavalry's weapons against the Ottoman positions, and they overran the Ottoman positions. It was a victory. I'm not denying that. What I'm trying to telling, what failed on the other side, and what could have been achieved if the British, instead of attacking Beersheba first, attacked Gaza. They could have destroyed the whole Ottoman army, and we would have a completely different outcome. So I am a bit speculating what ifs might have been, and trying to see what happened on the other side of the hill. Thank you.
We might just stop there, sorry, because it is 11:30. We've only got the room until 11:30. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much for being here. Can we put our hands together? So while we're waiting for the raffle tickets, and I'll get Professor to pull the raffle tickets out for me. So,
But I also purchased some.
I'll take that.